So a fun fact about me, before I became a CPG nerd and was the weird person in the grocery store taking pictures of aisles, I actually started my career in non-traditional consumer research. And among consumer researchers, and let me tell you, this was a very cool crowd, there was one group that was regarded as kind of the rock stars of our industry, IDEO. They rolled into engagements, quickly sussed out where the opportunity was or wasn't, and crafted unique strategies that wowed clients and disrupted categories. They were able to push their clients to think differently and, frankly, to be uncomfortable sometimes. So today, I'm very excited to introduce you to Meija Jacobs, a senior director at IDEO in their Design for Foods group. Now, they've worked with a number of brands that you might recognize, such as Right Rice and Revolution Foods. And while they do amazing work, what's most important that we want you to take away is to understand the unique way that they go about conducting their work, why it's different than surveys or focus groups behind a two-way mirror, and most importantly, what strategies you can put into play as you grow your own brands. So please welcome Meija to share this and more. Thank you.
I don't need the podium. All right. Can anyone read this? Does that help? So that was based on a font from designer Daniel Britton to recreate the feeling of reading with dyslexia. And the font was designed to slow down your information processing, which is what happens when you experience dyslexia. It has nothing to do with intelligence and everything to do with simply how your brain processes information. What happens to people who experience dyslexia is actually different than this. They see letters and numbers bounce around, dance around, twist and turn on a page or a screen in front of them. And it can be incredibly aggravating and also sometimes quite embarrassing. But what Daniel understood as a designer is that in order to truly design for a problem that we don't understand, we actually have to feel what it feels like for the people that we're designing for. So I'm Meija, and I'm here to talk to you about how human-centered design, and specifically the empathy that's required of practicing human-centered design, can be a way to supercharge your brands and grow them. The company where I work, IDEO, is a global design and innovation company, and I have the privilege of working with experts from all over the world that come from various backgrounds, from doctors to packaging engineers to business designers, data scientists, and we all come together to practice human-centered design in order to create a positive impact in the world and tackle some pretty hairy challenges. The guy that you see in the middle there is the only one who's not wearing glasses, is our founder, David Kelly, and this is some of us celebrating him on his 60th birthday at IDEO. And this is David back in the day, in some of the earliest days of IDEO, doing one of its very first product design projects, which was to design the first Apple mouse. Now, early prototypes of the mouse used a butter dish for the body of the mouse and a deodorant roller ball to make it move around. And we prototyped, well, they prototyped, I definitely wasn't there then. And as they got further along in their prototypes, they were ready to start testing this new navigation experience with users and really understand how they could make it easy and intuitive to navigate. So David turned to IDEO's founder of human-centered design research, Jane Fulton Surrey, who you see there, observing a user. And Jane spent time with users to observe how they were interacting with these prototypes and what their experience was like. One of the things that she noticed was they would occasionally grimace or furrow their eyebrows, but it wasn't clear to her what that was about. But after spending enough time and talking to people and observing, it became clear that this was about the tension between this new empowerment that they felt in being able to navigate this mouse around the screen with the confusion about whether or not something they had done had had a response. So people weren't clear necessarily if what they had done had immediate reaction. This ultimately led IDEO to design into the mouse an audible and tactile click, which today is ubiquitous, and we don't even think about it anymore. IDEO has moved on from its product design roots. We still do product design, but we do lots of other things today, using human-centered design to tackle challenges in the world of mobility, health, and food systems, among many other things. I am one of the founding leaders of IDEO Design for Food, where we use design to create sustainable change in the food landscape, and really create better food choices for more people. And we do that across a lot of different types of projects, from packaging design, like with Keith on Right Rice, to sustainable approaches to packaging, to healthy behavior change and food as medicine, and also looking at how we can design systems like in schools and school lunch to help kids navigate learning better, more healthful ways to eat. One of the things that hasn't changed, though, about what IDEO does and how we do what we do is human-centered design and the empathy that that requires. And that means that every design challenge that we tackle, whether it's a systemic change or whether it's a new food product, means that we start with people. And we absolutely also look at the possibilities that technology offers us to do new things and the requirements that business has of us to create success in the marketplace. And we bring all those things together to create integrated outcomes, but it always starts with people. And by understanding their needs, we can get to design solutions that meet their unmet needs in new and creative ways. We do that in lots of different ways, quantitative and qualitative methodology. The point of our inspiration research is to go out in the world and really be in context with people, to be in the places and spaces where their mindset is about the thing that we're trying to study and learn. So, we might go to a rest stop to study snacking behavior or a college campus. We might go shopping with a consumer. We might go into a cafeteria and spend a day at a school to understand how to design for school lunch. But it's all in the service of understanding what's really going on for them in that context and not ask them to artificially try to remember something that they may or may not be able to recall. So of course, we're looking for the observable things, what people say and what they do. Those matter, those are really important in informing how we come up with solutions. But the slightly trickier part is getting deeper beneath the surface to what people really think and what they really feel. And that is what requires empathy. How do I know that empathy is a superpower? Not only has it been shown to help people solve problems more creatively, but I personally came from the world of marketing and advertising before IDEO. And I worked with a lot of really smart marketers that knew how to blend the art and science of brand strategy and expression and create some really big, powerful, beautiful brands that did really well. But I also saw a lot of brands fail to make a real connection with consumers. And oftentimes, that was because of an over-reliance on marketing research. Don't get me wrong, marketing research can be a really powerful tool to help us understand behavioral shifts and mindsets and things that are happening on the surface, but it doesn't always get to that think and feel in the most powerful way. And it can lead to making sometimes a lot of wrong assumptions about what the problem to solve really is. So these are a few of my favorite fail-to-learn examples in the world of food, of making some wrong assumptions about the problem to solve. Anyone old enough to remember Colgate beef lasagna? So in 1982, Colgate had research that showed them that their core target was single or widowed, liked to stay in and read magazines, was conscious about their food choices, but really liked convenience. So they made a bet that they could get their brand loyal shoppers to choose Colgate over other frozen entrees in the supermarket. Needless to say, it didn't work, and it doesn't exist today. Some of these others you may or may not be familiar with, but one that I do have to touch on is McDonald's biggest investment in marketing and research development in history was the Arch Deluxe. This was in the 90s, and they had research that showed them that consumers were having an increasing appetite for a more sophisticated burger. And so Arch Deluxe was designed as the answer to this research, complete with new secret sauce for grown-ups and sweet, extra fancy tomato ketchup, and an ad campaign that was aimed squarely at adults and frankly alienating to kids. So while indeed in the mid-90s, consumers were increasingly willing to spend a little bit more money for a more sophisticated burger, they weren't necessarily willing to do that at McDonald's, where they go for comfort and nostalgia and familiarity, and most of all, a kid-friendly atmosphere. So design-driven innovation has a distinct advantage over market research-led approaches. When brands take the time to really understand human needs, they can design and bring not only emotional value to people, but real business value. Some recent research from McKinsey and Forrester actually bears that out. They looked at human-centered design, companies that were practicing human-centered design approaches, like prototyping and empathy building. And what they showed was that the companies that were doing that were outperforming the average S&P in terms of revenue growth and in terms of delivering greater shareholder returns. So I'm going to share with you 3 quick lessons that I have learned in my last decade at IDEO about how to use empathy to build and grow strong brands. The first is about listening. I've learned that I really have to listen with an open mind in order to understand needs in a way that I can reframe the problem and come up with the right solution. Secondly, I've learned that you have to get tangible as early as you can in the process in order to test out hypotheses in ways that will lead you to a path that you might have not seen if you assumed that the idea that you had was the right one to begin with. And then feedback. I've learned to, both from clients and consumers, take feedback with a great deal of humility when it comes to putting our ideas out into the world, because you might think it's right, but you're going to learn something along the way that's going to tell you that there's something that needs to be tweaked, something that needs to be made better to really tighten the value proposition, to make the value proposition like laser sharp. So first, a lesson in listening. We do this in lots of ways. We might start by listening at scale. So using data science to look for social signals and try to understand what sentiment is shifting in certain ways and form hypotheses around that. And then we might actually go put ourselves in the shoes of other people that we're designing for. So this is one of our designers for a hospital emergency room redesign project that we did for Kaiser, obviously a few years back. Look at that camera there. He filmed the whole experience and had hours of footage of looking at a really sad ceiling with not a whole lot of interaction coming from staff to help him understand kind of what was coming next and where he was in the system. And so from this, we took a lot of inspiration and empathy about how we could design the emergency room experience to be more joyful, a little bit warmer. I mean, joyful is a bit of a stretch, obviously, from the emergency room, but at least more warm in terms of the environment that you'd be looking at, and better ways to understand where you stood in the process. One of the things that we have a rule around when it comes to listening is not to assume. So years ago, we worked with P&G to break into what was then an emerging category of men's beauty. And we wanted to learn from extremes, people that had really different types of experiences. So we talked to people that were self-professed experts in beauty and people that claimed to do nothing at all to enhance their personal experience. And this gentleman was one of those people. He's a construction worker. And as we were in the interview with him, we noticed this foot spa sitting on the floor next to him and asked him about it. And he said, "Oh yeah, I bought that for my wife. But actually, I wear steel-toe boots all day at work, and my feet get kind of funky. And when summer rolls around, I like to be able to wear flip-flops to barbecues, so I guess I actually use it more than she does." So this helped us reframe the problem from how do we introduce men to beauty care to how do we help men with the maintenance that they need to feel at their best. More recently, we worked with Plum Organics to rethink baby food packaging. And we spent time with parents in homes feeding kids through spoon feeding, which is arguably a much more intimate and bonding experience than eating out of a pouch. But it comes with a whole lot of stress about mess. There's multiple components to deal with, from the container to the lid to the spoon to the squirmy baby. And so parents had a lot of strategies for how to try to contain that mess. We also heard from them a tension between the desire to introduce their babies to lots of varieties of types of food and to have those foods stay fresh. So when we looked inside many fridges, there were half-opened, partially used containers that parents had no idea when they were opened, and it really gave them this cognitive load. So this set us off on a path of designing lots of possible solutions, some of which did not work out, like extra gripability in the container. How could we make it really grippy in your hand? Or how could we design into the lid a way to scrape out the excess food? But all of that led us to ultimately the solution, which was these transparent, stackable, handheld bowls that highlight the freshness of the ingredients and have an integrated spoon rest, as well as a really handy way to help parents keep track of when they opened the container. So when you listen with an open mind, you can find the unmet need and really find a new way to solve the problem that might be more creative than you would have started out with. All right, so let's talk about prototyping. Getting tangible quickly to test your hypotheses. So what we do is we take our hypotheses and we turn them into tangible questions that we can put in front of people and learn about, or even just put in front of ourselves to kind of play with and figure out. And you can do this with literally anything in a super scrappy way. So we prototype food, we prototype packaging, we prototype spaces, we prototype digital experiences. So just to give you a quick example, this is a prototype that we did for a digital interaction for a Sesame Street app.
Cue music. So this is possible dance moves for Monster Maker. So music starts, and I'm the player, so I come in and I touch the monster, and he gives me a special dance move. I go and touch again, and he does a different one. And it can go for as long as I want, and he has a few signature moves. And when I've had enough and I'm done dancing, I touch the back button, and it pauses, and the music stops. Monster Maker.
Cool.
Sonic. Come on, Sonic.
Wow.
Get in there, Sonic.
Any guesses on what that is? It's just a piece of foam core with a poster printed out and a cutout in the middle. Super scrappy. So more recently, we worked with a couple of Bay Area entrepreneurs. So we worked with Emily and Anjan to take their Indian restaurant and scale it in terms of both a fast casual offering and a natural foods retail offering. This is the brand that we designed with them, called Dosa by Dosa. We designed the entire brand experience. One of the things that we did was take this space in Oakland and take it from this to this, and work with them on their retail presence, taking it from this to this. And this work took 2 months. So again, super scrappy prototyping got us to this result. The brand system that we designed was inspired by Indian truck art, and we used these patterns as the core for the system, which was a way to create both a cohesive and flexible system that would allow Emily and Anjan to forever keep adding new food lines and new SKUs to the lineup, as well as work with off-the-shelf packaging in a way that would help the brand be cohesive and stand out. Now, one thing that they did decide they wanted to invest in when it came to packaging was their namesake, the dosa. That's the box that you see up there. It's 20 inches long. It's a fermented batter of lentil and rice. It's quite delicious, and it comes with 3 dipping sauces. This is how we designed it to be served in the restaurant. But when it came to go and delivery, this is what we were working with, and it wasn't gonna fly. So we worked with Emily and Anjan to come up with some criteria to design a custom dosa box that they were going to invest in and have custom tooling done. A few principles that we came up with were sustainability mattered to them and to us, so it had to be compostable, it had to be easy to pack so employees weren't slowing things down, it had to be intuitive and delightful to eat out of, and it had to be iconic because it was the restaurant's namesake and the signature dish. So we got to work prototyping, and we had a couple of questions, many questions, these are a couple of them. Maybe Tiffin-inspired forms could be a way to create intuitive and delightful eating experience. Maybe a theatrical opening or like an unboxing experience could be a way to make it feel iconic. Did the iconic necessarily have to come from like the shape or the things on top of the box, or could it be about the experience? So here we are with the Meitras going over the prototypes, and we learned a lot from this. We learned that the friendly form factor of the Tiffins was a great idea, but it would actually require a two-part eating experience where the lid would have to be removed with the sauces. And we learned that the wow factor was really about opening it up and seeing these beautiful, vibrant sauces on the inside and not so much about the opening itself. So we landed on a really simple form factor that we then realized, because of the compostability factor, couldn't have any color applied to it. And we were concerned that it would be too plain in that system that's so vibrant. And that's when our packaging engineer piped up and said, well, you know, the pattern, we could think about molding it right into the pulp. So that's how the first custom to-go 20-inch pizza box of dosa boxes was designed. And now Emily and Anjan are in 200 natural foods retailers with the line of off-the-shelf packaging that we designed for them. Finally, I'll make this quick because I think I have a couple minutes. A lesson in feedback. So I've learned that, again, I have to approach this with a great deal of humility, but when I do that well, I get to a value proposition that's pretty tight and that matters to people in the real world. We do a lot of different approaches to get feedback. We might do Shark Tank style feedback sessions with consumers. We might do pop-ups where we do looks like, eats like, cooks like. We might do co-creation sessions where we have people give input and feedback through hands-on. When we worked with the J.M. Smucker Company recently to take this beloved peanut butter brand beyond the jar and into snacking for kids and families, we started with an understanding of like, what does this brand really stand for? So we knew that it was parent acceptable and kid friendly and seen as wholesome and nourishing, but we still needed to figure out like really where it should go in the snacking space. One of the other things that came to us pretty early on was its equity is in smooth, creamy peanut butter. Even if it's crunchy peanut butter, it's still smooth, creamy peanut butter with crunchy bits in it. And so to take this into snacking, we couldn't go too far. We couldn't go to like a sort of peanut butter flavored thing that's in a form that has nothing to do with peanut butter because it would really break the equity of this brand. So what we did was we actually broke the equity of the brand by developing these sacrificial concepts that we knew wouldn't work, that we knew were too far for the brand, so that we could provoke consumers to tell us what was really important. And from that, we gained a ton of empathy about the need that parents have to keep their kids away from empty carbs. What was striking to us was it's not just about sugar. It's not just about the sugar crash. It's about the empty carb and sugar crash. The carbs were the bigger enemy to parents than sugar. But yet, when it comes to the world of snacking, it's what they have to deal with, and often it's what kids will actually eat. So we prototyped with the R&D teams, we tested different positioning approaches, and we did co-creation with consumers, and all of that led us to, we were inspired too by things that we saw parents and kids do at home with peanut butter when they actually had time to make snacks, but this isn't something that most people have the time to do every day. And ultimately, this led us to a set of food rules that the J.M. Smucker Company was confident through the consumer work adopting as the guideposts for this new Jif snacking brand, which was, let's lead with our strength, Always first ingredient peanuts. Let's not add any junk when we can help it, so no corn syrup. And let's have not only protein as the solution, but the perfect combination of protein and fiber that creates sustained energy and satiety to help kids last throughout the day. And that's Jif Power-Ups. They're actually pretty delicious, and they did give the JMS company number one innovation launch in category last year. So they're pretty happy with it too. So I hope that these lessons have resonated with you, and I'm happy to talk more about them at the breaks. I'd love to hear too from you what you're working on and how these things might help to inspire the things that you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for watching NOSH. Don't forget to hit subscribe and ding that bell.